welcome to the world today. I'm Joke Rogers. Here are the headlines. Ukraine, Russia top officials top the agenda as officials meet in the first direct talk since 2022. U.S. President Donald Trump wraps up 3 days Middle East tour. And nearly 100 people, including children, have been killed in a fresh large-scale Israeli offensive in northern Gaza. Welcome again, everyone. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. We begin with Istanbul, where representatives from Russia, Ukraine and Turkey sit at the negotiating table, marking the resumption of direct talks between Moscow and Kyiv for the first time since 2022. Notably, neither the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, were present after several days of controversy surrounding the face-to-face meeting. Mr. Putin had earlier proposed restarting direct talks with Ukraine without preconditions, while President Zelensky initially demanded a ceasefire until U.S. President Donald Trump urged him to accept. The previous talks between the two sides was also held at the Istanbul location 3 years ago. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of sending what he describes as empty heads to talk in Istanbul. He made these comments during a meeting of European leaders in Albania, saying the Russians are doing everything they can to turn the Istanbul meeting into a staged, empty process, just like the ones in 2022. However, he urged that there needs to be a strong reaction, including sanctions against Russia's energy sector and banks, adding that pressure must continue to rise until real progress is made. In the meantime, Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Ling Jian has reiterated the country's support for peaceful dialogue and negotiation as Ukraine and Russia send teams to Istanbul for the first peace talks in 3 years. Speaking at a daily press conference in Beijing, Mr. Ling Jian said China's position on the Ukrainian crisis has been consistent and clear. He emphasized that through dialogue and negotiation, a fair, lasting and binding peace agreement is acceptable to all parties, with a view towards ultimately realizing a political solution to the Ukrainian crisis. During the briefing, Mr. Lin also slammed the new U.S. guidance to curb Huawei, discussing restrictions on rare earth metals to the U.S. and also commenting on the possible nuclear deal between the U.S. and Iran. In the meantime, U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed interest in meeting with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, as soon as possible, as peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are set to take place in Istanbul. Mr. Trump made the comments during a business roundtable in Abu Dhabi, insisting that nothing is going to happen until he and the Russian leader have a face-to-face meeting. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also traveled to Turkey, but claims he won't attend the talks after his Russian counterpart declined his calls for direct talks. President Putin had earlier proposed direct talks, the first since his invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, but sent a lower-level delegation instead.
Now it's time to go back home. My daughter had a baby. I'm going to go back home and see that little baby. And then we get back to a lot of work. We'll see what happens with Russia and Ukraine. I think it's something that's just, you got to stop the killing. 5,000 people a week. 5,000 young people a week on average being killed in a war that is going nowhere. It's a shame. Should have never happened. But we have other things to do also. Plus we have an Iran situation, which we're going to take care of. One way or the other, we're taking care of. It'll be taken care of 100%. It'll be done nicely or not nicely. And the not nicely is not a good thing for them. And I think We're talking to them, and I think they've come a long way. It's time for us to just do it. I said, they all said Putin was going and Zelensky was going, and I said, if I don't go, I guarantee Putin's not going. And he didn't go, and I understand that, but we're going to get it. We're going to get it done. We've got to get it done.
Meanwhile, President Trump has wrapped up his Middle East visit with stops in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates that saw him reimagine alliances on the world stage. The tour, which has brought lucrative deals for the U.S. and the three countries, including an investment worth $1.4 trillion from the UAE into the U.S. AI sector over the next decade, and an agreement for Qatar to buy $42 billion worth of U.S. military hardware. The UAE and the U.S. also plan to spend $440 billion in the energy sector through to 2035, also hinting at the new global tariff terms, and appear to confirm Iran has received a nuclear deal proposal. At the end of his visit, the U.S. president sent a message of unity to the UAE citizens, saying great unity, great faith, incredible people with a tremendous leader.
The U.S. president arrived in Riyadh, the Saudi Arabian capital, to a royal welcome of purple instead of a red carpet. Both sides signed landmark deals on defense, energy, artificial intelligence, and economy. The agreements will see the Kingdom of Saudi commit to investing $600 billion in the U.S., as well as a $142 billion deal to provide Riyadh with state-of-the-art warfighting equipment.
Strategic partnership will continue with more.
The U.S. president met with Syria's President Ahmed al-Sharaa the day before he had announced the lifting of sanctions on Syria. Al-Sharaa expressed gratitude for regional and international support, affirming that Syria is moving confidently towards a more inclusive and cohesive future. The country has seen reports of deadly violence in recent months, particularly targeting minorities, which the government has promised to investigate.
We are currently exploring normalizing relations with Syria's new government, as you know, beginning with my meeting with President Ahmed al-Sharaa and Secretary Rubio's meeting with the Syrian foreign minister in Turkey after discussing the situation with Crown Prince Mohammed and President Erdogan of Turkey. I am also ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria to give them a fresh start. It gives them a chance for greatness. The sanctions were really crippling, very powerful.
This announcement was celebrated on the streets of Damascus. And one praised by the Saudi government.
We are incredibly grateful to President Trump for taking the courageous decision to lift sanctions on Syria. I know this is not an easy decision, but we believe very, very strongly that it's a necessary decision, that it's a necessary step in supporting not just the stability of Syria and regional stability, because if we are able to build a stable Syria that is independent, that is sovereign, that is able to focus on its own future and its development, that will have an impact throughout the region, but also because of the long suffering of the Syrian people, who deserve, after many, many years of difficulty, of struggle, to have a better future. And
On the second leg of his visit, which was to Qatar, the U.S. president paid tribute to his host, the Emir of Qatar, and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, as he signed defense agreements in Doha. The Qatari government committed to the largest order of jets in the history of Boeing. The U.S. president said the oil and gas-rich monarchy, which has offered to provide the U.S. president with a luxury palace on wings, committed to spending $100 billion on the planes as part of a broader $243.5 billion economic pledge.
The trade is Kelly's telling me from Boeing, that's the largest order of jets in the history of Boeing. That's pretty good. And that's 140, was that a 140 or 160? Yeah, but you're right, it's actually 200, including the 40, so it's over $200 billion. But 160 in terms of the jets, that's fantastic. So that's a record, Kelly. And congratulations to Boeing. Get those planes out there. Get them out there.
The U.S. president was given the palace treatment here and even in Saudi Arabia. President Trump's visit ended in the United Arab Emirates on Thursday evening following a flight on Air Force One, accompanied by UAE Air Force F-16 and Mirage fighter jets. The U.S. president landed in Abu Dhabi in the UAE, where he met President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. As part of his visit, he was given a tour of the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque, accompanied by Sheikh bin Zayed.
Joining us now is geopolitical analyst Edward Okpa, who joins us from Texas in the United States to get, a feel of some of the scenes that we just witnessed there. President Donald Trump wrapping up his Middle East tour. Several things happened during that visit, and that's where we're going to start. A pleasure having you on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so what do you think, of the tour of the Middle East just embarked upon by U.S. President Donald Trump?
Look, he's been in the media for the past few days since he was there, and it was a success. Trump does things like nobody else because he wasn't a typical politician who got to the to become president. He went from executive office of his own company to become that of President of America. Nobody in the history of presidency has done that. So his approach to things are totally different. He's a businessman. He's a developer. He sees things other people don't see. And oftentimes what you see that is being said against him, things by politicians, the typical, let's have a committee, let's do this, let's be this, let's be diplomatic. How are you being diplomatic when things are falling apart? You have to do things totally different. And so what he has done is to show the world and show any president that is serious about the success of their own country, you have to move away from the conventional approach of doing things and try something else. So I'm happy to see what happened during this visit, and of course a lot of things is going to be after the fact. The agreements are made. We'll see what the outcome is. But so far, even those who don't like him are beginning to say, oh my God, this guy is pulling it off. And that's why he was elected. And thank God he didn't win the second term consecutively, because he wouldn't be this effective. Now that he come back, more energized, more focused, and learned a lesson of what he did right and wrong the first time, he is bringing a new excitement to the office.
Right, and this trip and some of the deals that he signed, including investment worth $1.4 trillion from the UAE into the U.S. AI sector over the next decade, and also an agreement for Qatar to buy $42 billion worth of U.S. military hardware. These deals are falling into place at a time when, there's been a whole lot of uproar about, tariffs here and there on several other countries that were, previously thought of as U.S. allies. Why go to the UAE, for these agreements?
Well, when you look at, geopolitical regions in the world, there's no other region of the world that has more per capita than, the Arab nations. You can go, it's not China, it's not Russia, it's not even the United States. So, we follow the money. And if the money, is going to energize your own economy, why not? UAE wasn't going to do this with China. They were not going to put that kind of money in China. For all the noise China makes, China is still a sea country. Nobody wants to go there. Nobody wants to learn that language. But I give them a credit for having learned how to put their better foot forward. Is it Russia that they're going to put all that kind of money? Heck no. It's in the Western Europe. So U.S. still a destination for sensible and reliable investment, because this is where one place you can put your money and then you don't have to worry about getting a return. And so that's what UAE people are. They have cash. They are flushed with cash, because they are small populated countries and they have a lot of revenue from oil and gas. So they're going to put it somewhere. And America happens to be, that's country where they want to do it. And we're seeing that evidence.
And what kind of, effects, positive effects do you expect? Because if I go back to, when we talk about the tariffs, people were saying there was going to have an adverse effects on, American businesses and American consumers, because they will bear the brunt of it. But what do you expect to happen to American businesses and, other citizens, going forward, the after effects of, these deals that the president has just signed?
Well, again, it's America making the export. So America is not going to be putting a tariff on a country that is buying its own goods. If you remember, the reason for the tariff tension between China and U.S. is because China doesn't buy anything from the U.S. So there's a trade imbalance and a whole lot of trade deficit. So, but UAE, they've always bought American things, and America is not going to, make it harder for them. I think at the end of the day, there'll probably be no tariff, because the amount of money they are bringing into America is going to help the American manufacturing, American service industries to do what's to grow, and they even make money cheaper. Because again, you don't want to take money that you're not going to use. If you have too much money in your economy that you can't deploy to something that makes sense for you to grow, it's going to choke you. So America has the capacity to absorb all this money. They are not coming one time; they're going to come over the next decade. So again, Trump has 3 and something more years to go. So we'll see how much of that is going to come into the country while he's still in office. And then, if that happens to be the case, then it says, a trend. And then again, it's all about win-win. UAE is going to win, America is going to win, and anybody who's part of this arrangement or part of this regional cooperation is going to win. The world is looking for prosperity. Remember, of all these things that happens, you still look around. A lot of people don't have access to electricity. A lot of people don't have access to basic health care. And we need to change that. You don't have to be in America or any of this sort of thing. It has to be a localized demand. Because human beings are just motivated by what they want, a higher standard of living. So when their government is stifling them and making it only possible for less than 1% of the population, that's wickedness. So, it's going to have a snowball effect. This is like, when you drop a pebble on the surface of a river, the wave is going to carry. So, again, everybody needs to be, excited, but they have to have caution because, again, there are people that are unhappy about this stuff and they're going to try to do anything they can to make it, not come through. But people should be happy when good things are happening to enhance their own lives.
Right, and at the end of the visit, the U.S. president sent a message of unity to the UAE citizens, saying great unity, great faith, incredible people with a tremendous leader. We did listen to, the leader also in that report we played some minutes ago, saying that he was happy and thanks Mr. Trump for lifting sanctions, on Syria, saying that it's going to do greater good for regional stability, not just for Syria as well. So, I mean, what do you project in the future for the region? Do you think this is the beginning, of stability? We do also know that there was a deal, for a nuclear deal, proposed nuclear deal between the United States and, of course, Iran as well. So what do you foresee as the future of stability in the region? Do you think that, this visit to the UAE is going to, cause some sort of stability for the region, which, because of the war between Israel and, Hamas, what has been going on, and there were fears that there was going to be a lot of trouble ahead?
Of course, I mean, again, my whole thing by my own nature is that people have to be happy wherever they live. And a lot of people are not going to move physically from the countries where they, have few that moves. So what Trump is doing and what the regional leadership is witnessing is that, look, there's an opportunity for us to do better. There's an opportunity for us to harmonize because, love thy neighbor should be a golden rule. If you don't love your neighbor, can you tolerate your neighbor? Can you accommodate them? If you can have those tolerance and accommodation, then you are able to do things for your own good and they do things for their own good. But when there's a tension of, religion, because if you look at that region, what has caused all these things is religion, the Muslims and the Christians and, the hating and the loving and all this other stuff. So maybe now, Trump never said anything about the religion. Remember when he went to the mosque in UAE, he took off his shoes and just to respect them. It's not about the Muslims being better than the Christians or vice versa. People are going to be people. So when you get into those things that are very sensitive to their nature, they're going to revolt. So what you want to do is talk about food, shelter, and clothing, prosperity, security. Who doesn't want to come out of their home and take a walk on the street and don't have the fear of getting shot or getting killed because you come from the wrong side of the neighborhood or come from the right side of religion? So that's what Trump is promoting. But again, remember, he's going to come home because he's not going to be president of that part of the world. He's the president of America, and he happens to have the biggest microphone, and that is why people are listening, and he's saying and using languages that no other person is using. Maybe the people that are going to benefit when I say, you know what, this makes sense, why don't we give it a try?
Right, and just before I let you go, I will veer off a bit, from that UAE trip to the issue between Russia and Ukraine. Peace talks, taking place in Istanbul, of course, without the major players. Mr. Putin is not there. Mr. Zelensky is also not there. And, it did take the intervention of Mr. Trump to get these negotiations going in the first place, with the two leaders adamant saying they will not attend. They sent lower level delegates for those talks. What do you think is going to happen in Istanbul?
Well, again, I didn't think Putin was going to show up and Zelensky. I think who's going to be the glue between the two is going to be Trump. And Trump has said it in one of his comments that, it's going to get done. So he's going to come back. He's going to, say, hey, guys, let's get together. Remember, ego is also part of this whole bluff thing that everybody does. It's going to say, hey, I don't want to talk to you if just, at the same level. But somebody's going to make that same level rise to where, people get together to meet and talk. I think, Russia and Ukraine are stressed and strained because of this war, and except the two parties come to terms again, accommodating and tolerating. And if Trump is going to be that actor that will bring that tolerance and accommodation so that they can meet. He's going to do it. Because one time, in the first time, Trump has said, nobody has to die to be able to live in a country. I mean, that statement is very powerful. We are all entitled to life as given by our Creator. No human being has the right to starve, snuffle because of power. So when people buy into that notion and begin to embrace life, it's precious. Nothing else is going to happen. So I'm hoping that based on the microphone he has and doing the diplomacy like nobody's doing it, and people are listening and thinking, and then they come back to terms and say, you know what, this is common sense. Common sense, like my mom used to say, is not common. It's actually the fundamental to intelligence when you have common sense. And I'm sure the people that are looking at it and say, you know what, why are we killing each other? Why is this bloodshed for? At the end of the day, everybody's going to die. Why can't we just live?
Right, so geopolitical analyst Edward Ekwa, thank you so much for your time on the show again today. Pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me.
Hamas-run Civil Defense Agency says nearly 100 people, including children, have been killed in a fresh, large-scale Israeli ground, air and sea attack launched in northern Gaza. The Civil Defense says at least 9 homes and tents housing civilians have been bombed overnight, and it had received dozens of calls from people trapped. According to local residents, the attack began with smoke bomb followed by intense artillery shelling from nearby Israeli positions. The attack in North Gaza comes after Israeli airstrikes killed more than 120 people, mostly in the south, on Thursday. In response, Israel's military says it was operating to locate and dismantle terrorists' infrastructure sites in North Gaza and had eliminated several terrorists over the past day. Meanwhile, the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced that the U.S. is troubled by the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The comments come as at least 114 Palestinians were killed in Israeli airstrikes on Thursday. Mr. Rubio then called on Hamas to surrender and release hostages, saying there could be no peace as long as the group exists. Gaza has been under a complete Israeli blockade of all food and other humanitarian supplies for 10 weeks. Mr. Rubio's comments appear to be a reference to a controversial Israeli-American proposal to use private providers to set up aid collection points in Gaza, a plan which has been rejected by the UN as unethical and unworkable. Meanwhile, 12 World Health Organization staff, 284 patients and companions have gathered for a pre-coordinated medical evacuation after an attack occurred in Gaza earlier this week, causing death and distress. While none in the evacuation group were harmed, the attack reportedly resulted in 6 deaths and 40 injuries on the hospital premises. Despite the high-risk conditions, the WHO has successfully carried out the medical evacuation to Italy, Turkey, Romania, Jordan, and the UAE via the Kerem Shalom crossing. The organization urged that hospitals must be safeguarded so as to serve their life-saving function.
We are at the moment at the European Gaza Hospital. Today we are aiming at conducting a big medical evacuation of more than 300 people to European Union countries and Emirates.
A mother of an Israeli soldier, Hadar Goldin, whose remains have been held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip since 2014, has called on the international community to enforce Resolution 2474. This includes demanding the return of the missing and upholding the dignity that every human deserves in life and death. Mrs. Leah Goldin, who introduced by Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon ahead of a Security Council meeting on missing persons in armed conflict, says the very institution that brokered the ceasefire under which adoption was taken has not yet upheld its own responsibility to correct the injustice that followed. She calls on the United Nations and the United States to return her son to be buried in his homeland, Israel. In response, Israel's ambassador Danny Danon claims that Hamas steals the bodies of the fallen heroes and turns them into bargaining chips while using them to negotiate, to delay, and to profit. He then called on the UN Secretary General to recalculate his approach and to think if he really wants to be involved in the humanitarian aid in Gaza.
In the years since its adoption, Resolution 2474 has been forgotten, its principles ignored, its enforcement non-existent. The very institution that brokered the ceasefire under which Adar was taken has yet to uphold its own responsibility to correct the injustice that followed. That is not just a diplomatic failure, it is a moral one. This is not about politics, this is not about negotiation, this is about the right of a mother to bury her son. When the United Nations passed a resolution, it must mean something. It must be backed by will, by consistency, by action. Instead, we have silence, and in that silence, justice has been denied, not only to my family, but to every family who places trust in the promises of the international law.
Start to operate very soon, and it will be run by the fund itself. Israel will not be involved inside the operation center. We will not be the one giving the aid. We will not be even in those centers. It will be run by the fund itself, led by the US, and I'm happy that a few NGOs joined these efforts, and I'm calling to the Secretary General to recalculate his approach and to think if he really wants to be involved in the humanitarian aid in Gaza, he should sit down with the head of the fund, with the US mission here, and understand what is going to happen. It's a major operation that will start very soon to operate.
In the meantime, thousands gathered in Madrid for a major pro-Palestinian protest marking the 77th anniversary of the Nakba, the mass displacement of Palestinians in 1948. The protest coincided with the growing international attention on Spain's role in arms trade with Israel amid the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the West Bank. Footage shows protesters rallying on the streets with flags and banners, including a tent draped in Palestinian flag. Police were seen speaking with demonstrators, while Spanish politician and Podemos General Secretary could be seen participating in the march. Protester Victor Valdez stated that they consider that the 77 years after the Nakba, it's necessary to demand peace, the disarmament of Israel, and the breaking of diplomatic relations. Meanwhile, clashes broke out between protesters and police in Berlin as thousands also marched to the German capital demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, also marking the 77th anniversary of Nakba Day. According to reports, more than 1,100 pro-Palestinian activists joined the demonstration in the Kreuzberg district of the German capital, and at least 600 police officers and emergency service personnel were deployed to maintain order and assist those injured in the clashes. During the clashes, protesters threw bottles, paint and flares at law enforcement officers, and more than 50 people were arrested. Protesters reiterated their demands for the creation of a Palestinian state, but complained that this solution was still a long way off.
Thousands about whether the phrase never again to them means never again genocide or never again being critical of anything any Jew ever does. But even if they think that they are friends to Israel, it is appropriate to tell someone when they are doing something wrong. And in my view, never again means never again genocide, which Germany is failing miserably at. The second thing I would say about Merz, other than a lack of clear distinction between his behavior and that of his predecessors yet, is that he is clearly against the German constitution and against free speech in Germany by residents of Germany.
And in Amsterdam, hundreds of people and local organizations also gathered to commemorate the Nakba anniversary. Some gathered at Dam Square, where emotional scenes unfolded with Palestinian songs and tears. A remembrance ceremony was also held at Dominicus Church, featuring prayers, candle lighting, and moments of solidarity. During the solemn gathering at Dominicus Church, many audience members were moved to tears as former Minister Jan Pronk delivered a powerful address, strongly criticizing the Dutch cabinet's position on the Palestinian issue.
Organized a Nakba commemoration here at the Dominicus Church in Amsterdam with a group, also people from local organizations. And now that the genocide is going on in Gaza for so long, we decided it is high time to also commemorate the Nakba as an ongoing event here in Amsterdam. Also because the Netherlands is still supporting Israel.
Well, we came here together for the commemoration of the Nakba. And for me, as an academic and writer, I am trying to honor the long colonial line dating back from 1917, 1948 until the present, where the Nakba is still ongoing. The Nakba is not finished. It's not a past tense. And I just feel the moral duty and obligation to speak out and to talk about the Dutch complicity of all our institutions, of the Dutch government, but also academia. I'm part of academia. I would say Dutch intellectuals and writers, they're silent about what is going on, what is happening in Palestine, genocide on the Palestinians.
And in London, dozens of pro-Palestine demonstrators also held a vigil to mark that anniversary and protest the ongoing Israeli actions in Gaza. According to reports, the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas erupted on October 7th when Hamas militants launched a surprise attack on southern Israel, killing 1,139 people, mostly civilians, taking over 200 hostages, many of whom remain held in Gaza.
We're here tonight standing in front of Downing Street. We've come together with different parts of the Palestine movement to commemorate 77 years of the Nakba. But more than anything, we're standing here as a commitment that we are going to continue the fight against Zionism, the fight against British complicity in not only the genocide, but broadly in allowing, like the Zionist entity, the State of Israel, to continue to exist, because we understand that their existence relies on the depopulation, on the mass starvation, on the forced displacement of Palestinian people from their land.
We're commemorating 77 years of Nakba, but what we really need to remember while we're out here is this is 77 years of occupation in a Nakba that's never ended. 77 years of Gaza being constantly bombarded, of the West Bank being constantly bombarded, of Palestinian children being abducted and them calling it detained. So we're here to basically remind people that it's 77 years of non-stop ethnic cleansing.
What concerns me most is that the present British government is supplying arms and bombs and planes to the Akrotiri base in Cyprus. Can we imagine that if some foreign nation bombs St. Thomas's Hospital and killed 80 people, what would the reaction of the British people be?
Global shipping firms are scrambling and new rules have been set to go into effect this fall in the United States, which means Chinese-built or owned ships will face new fees to the tune of millions of dollars. For more, we're joined by DW correspondent Cassandra Sundit in Berlin. Cassandra, great to see you this evening. What are these new American rules?
Well, shipping industry advocates that we've been speaking to say that these rules are the first of their kind. They essentially say that if a ship is Chinese-made and docking at a U.S. port, it gets hit with a fee of $18 per net ton and $50 per net ton if it's a Chinese-made ship and owned company. And these are really big ships. Just one container can weigh 17 tons, according to the Port of Los Angeles website. So that fee, when you think about these really big ships, stacks up pretty fast. These rules are set to go into effect in October. And I know that that sounds far away, but from a global shipping perspective, it's right around the corner. Getting a shipping container from port to port between China and the U.S., for example, can take anywhere from 14 to 42 days, according to some quotes I was looking at online. And when you think about ordering, manufacturing, shipping, and getting a product to shoot ad campaigns, we're basically already in the midst of Christmas time planning and scheduling for some companies and producers. So it's just another cost and more uncertainty for the global shipping industry at a crucial time for decision making.
Of these rules from the United States.
Right. I know that these fees aimed at China might sound like something straight out of President Trump's playbook, but this actually follows a petition filed by 5 major labor unions in the U.S. during the Biden administration. The aim was bringing back the U.S. shipping industry. Essentially, there is this pointing of the finger where officials say that the subsidies that are backing the Chinese shipbuilding industry contributed to the loss of American shipbuilding. That, of course, will sound familiar to many China watchers, where the U.S. is essentially upset about Chinese shipmaking dominance, but pointing to China as the reason isn't entirely accurate. The U.S. had been bleeding shipbuilding capacity to Asian countries like Japan and South Korea for years, especially in the middle of the last century. But China has really ramped up their production as well. When we look at new ships built per year, in 2015, China made about a third of them. But as of 2023, they make more than half, aka more than the rest of the world combined. And the problem, according to some critics, is that to build a ship, you need a healthy steel industry in your country. And the U.S. steel industry has been anemic for years.
And you touched a bit on the cost, but stepping back, what does this mean for, the global shipping industry?
Well, the shipping industry has really been facing some stormy seas recently. While these U.S.-China tariffs have been lowered for 90 days, the uncertainty there was affecting them. Because why would a business want to order items manufactured from China to the U.S. if they're going to be hit by triple-digit tariffs? But now these fees are going to go into effect in October. And by the way, they are also going to increase every year for the next 3 years. So now there's going to have to be a complete reconfiguration of which ships are going where. Because even if you're, say, a European shipping company, because these fees, don't forget, are still applicable even if the ship is owned by a non-Chinese company. And what experts expect is more ships that would normally go to the U.S. that they'll now, or as of October, start docking in Canada and Mexico, which have already seen increases in recent years. And a rescheduling of ships to make sure shipping companies are sending their non-Chinese made boats to the U.S. when possible. But looking here at Germany, for example, 3/4 of German shipping companies have fewer than 10 vessels. So there really isn't a lot of flexibility. And it's not like these shipping companies can just go to the shops and buy a new bunch of ships next month. I was reading an explainer from a marine equipment company out of Japan called Aegis, and they say building a ship can take anywhere from 1 to 3 years. So it's going to be choppy waters ahead for many of these shipping companies.
Right, Cassandra, thanks again for your time. We're in South Africa now, where the 100 most reputable Africans were honored last night at an event held in Johannesburg. The celebration spotlighted the continent's excellence, innovation, and resilience, recognizing individuals whose leadership, vision, and service continue to shape the continent's future. The gathering brought together community leaders, government officials, and representatives from various sectors to acknowledge these trailblazers and their outstanding contributions. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, has more.
A celebration of Africa's very best. The 100 most reputable Africans. The list recognizes individuals who have made outstanding contributions across various sectors. In his keynote address, the Nigerian traditional ruler of the Kingdom of Wari in Delta State, Ogiame Atuwadze III, urged Africans to uphold integrity as a core value in leadership and everyday life.
Because as we are elevated to roles of influence, we must take it with all seriousness. Because positive role modeling is actually very contagious. And once you are able to set an example for all to see that these things are possible, it's going to catch and spread like wildfire.
Meanwhile, South Africa's former Deputy President, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, highlighted the importance of serving others and giving back to the community.
And I think today in this room, I'm sitting with many leaders. And you probably feel it in your own work and the things that you do. Continuing to lead in that manner that brings others, sort of lifting as you clap, is probably the best way we can all serve.
Some of the dignitaries also shared their hopes for the Africa they envision, one driven by unity, innovation and inclusive development.
For me, as we build the Africa that we want through the implementation of the AFCFTA, it's very important to actually acknowledge our skills as CEOs, to acknowledge our skills as company chairmen, to acknowledge our skills of who we are as Africans, because no one else can actually build that Africa that we want besides us as Africans. So this is very important for us to actually say the skills that we want in the continent must be acknowledged, and the only way to acknowledge that skill is to actually celebrate our Africans and award them, to say, we see you.
Amazing. I love that. I want to see an Africans where travel is not restricted, where when they see your passport, as long as you are from this continent, you are well treated at the border. I want to see an Africans where trade is encouraged. We live in a world that if you ask an African man, where do you want to spend your holidays? We choose to say, I want to go to London or US. I want to see an African where we say, I want to go and spend my summer in South Africa.
What an inspirational time it has been, motivational time it has been here. I can tell you now that this was a clear reminder about the greatness within the African continent. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
President Bola Tinubu has been invited to the Vatican to attend a solemn mass marking the beginning of the pontificate of Pope Leo XIV, the 267th Bishop of Rome and the new leader of the Roman Catholic Church. A statement from the presidency says a papal invitation sent by Cardinal Pietro Parolin underscored the need for President Tinubu's physical presence at this moment of particular importance for the Catholic Church and the world afflicted by many tensions and conflicts. In the invitation, Pope Leo stressed, "Your great nation is particularly dear to me as I worked in the Apostolic Nunciature in Lagos during the 1980s. Joining the presidential delegation for Saturday, May 17, 2025, is the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Bianca Odumegwu-Ojukwu, Archbishop of Owerri, and President of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, Archbishop Lucius Ogoji, Archbishop Ignatius Kegama of Abuja, and Alfred Martins of Lagos, as well as the Catholic Bishop of Sokoto Diocese, Matthew Hassan Kuka." That's it on The World Today for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jokia Rogers.